Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host and head witch, Miss Solaris BlueRaven, at the helm this evening. Want to give a shout out to everybody at Revolution Radio, staff, producers, listeners, everybody in the chat room, and thank everyone for tuning in tonight. And we are listener supported, so if you like what you're listening to, please click on the donate button. We appreciate your support and thank you for any contribution you can make to this wonderful station. Nighthawk does have a special going on. Excuse me, for a $100 donation, you can receive a Jumbo Emergency Food Survival Seed Pack. And this is an excellent deal. So by donating $100, you'll be helping out the station and also securing your future by preparing or being prepared for whatever comes down the pike with this package. And who knows what can happen at this point in the continuum. Also, Thomas Becker, a.k.a. a Mad Painter, put a book together called A Mad Look at Reality. And for a $5 donation, you can receive this book from Painter, which is filled with wisdom from a wise soul. And I will be taking calls in the second hour. The number is 347-688-2902 or Freedom Screen on Skype. And you are listening to Studio A. And my special guest this evening is James Bartley. James Bartley has investigated alien abductions, and particularly reptilian abductions and military abductions, which of course are Mylabs, for over 20 years. James is a protege of legendary alien abduction researcher Barbara Bartholic. James is an independent historian with an emphasis on intelligence, counterintelligence, and special operations. He is a student of military history from antiquity to modern times and has made an in-depth study of the military-industrial financial security complex, which developed after World War II. It's a lot of interesting stuff right there. James personally investigated numerous reptilian abduction cases and military abduction cases in the high desert of Southern California. The high desert of Southern California is where the deep black aerospace industry is located, as well as military installations which figure prominently in UFO and Mylab research, such as Edwards Air Force Base and Naval Weapons Center, China Lake. He is familiar with much of the UFO military underground and undersea base activity in Southern California, Northern California, Arizona, and Nevada. Please welcome James to my show this evening. James, how are you?
I'm fine, Solaris. Thanks for having me here. This is quite an honor.
Oh, it's an honor for me to have you on. Believe me, I'm really thrilled to have you on tonight. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'd like to kind of give you the helm insofar as what you want to talk about tonight. And I have questions out, but I just kind of want to give everybody a feel for where you're at and the information you want to offer everybody. But I would like to ask you how you got involved in this area.
I had a number of experiences which led me to conclude that I was an alien abductee. I've always been interested in the subject of UFOs and other dimensions, the Bermuda Triangle, Sasquatch. All of these so-called fringe subjects have always been of interest to me. And I studied those subjects in parallel with studying Greek mythology, military history, and a number of other subjects. So when I began having once again a series of experiences in 1990, it compelled me to delve deeper into the subject of UFOs and alien abductions. Now, throughout my life, I've been having UFO sightings, paranormal experiences. I had a lot of UFO sightings, a lot of astral travel experiences, instances of spontaneous remote viewing. And it all culminated in 1990 when I came back from Germany. I spent the summer in Germany, and within a series of a span of just a few weeks, I had several UFO and alien abduction experiences almost back to back, and that really shattered my paradigm. And also all these other experiences were going on too. Things like objects disappearing and reappearing, and an instance when a glass of water basically jumped off of the center of a chair and landed on a carpet, and then the glass found its way back onto the center of the chair. So all these things were going on that gradually over time just shattered any kind of illusion that, you know, this world we live in is as cut and dried as the academics would have us believe.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that activity, was that part of your own energetic field, or was that something on an exterior level?
I believe that it was part of my field. I was what you would call psychic from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing about it was I thought that everyone had these kinds of experiences. I thought that everyone had precognitive dreams, astral experiences. I thought it was normal for everyone to have these experiences. But later, as I grew older and I'd bring up these subjects with people, like, they would look at me funny, and I'd realize, well, either no one else is having these experiences or no one wants to bring them up in mixed company, right? So it was a gradual process, but I've always been open to all these subjects, which people refer to as paranormal or phenomenal. They were always part of my life. I thought I was being haunted at one point, basically.
Did you ever figure that out?
Yeah, when it all came together in September of 1990, when I had a couple of weeks to go in Germany, I began sleeping with the lights on again. And then I started getting that creepy feeling of being watched and being observed. I lived right on the banks of the Rhine River, right on the edge of the Black Forest, and right across the Rhine River was Switzerland. And I lived right there at the very southern part of Germany in the Black Forest. And like when I would go walking down a certain part of alongside the Rhine River, at one point the forest literally closes around you. They've created like a tunnel out of the foliage and trees and whatnot. Very kind of grim fairy tale-ish, right? And I found myself the last couple of weeks, instead of just walking through this dark portal tunnel made out of trees and foliage, I would run through it because I was really getting this creepy crawly feeling, and I was leaving the lights on when I slept. And then when I returned back to America, to San Jose, California, what really hit home for me was this experience I had in full waking consciousness. I was laying in bed, and the lights were off. It was dark in my bedroom, and I woke up and I saw to my right what I now know to be a reptilian gray. It did not have fingers and nails. It had 3 claws, what the late great Dr. Carla Turner referred to as chicken claws. And there was 3 of these entities, one at the foot of the bed, one back towards the bedroom door, and then one towards the front of the bed where my head was. And they seemed to have their own ambient light source because my room was pitch black, and yet these entities seemed to be well lit, if you will. They had grayish skin, almost with a bluish tint, and they had a blue vest and some kind of insignia on the vest. And like many abductees, and I didn't realize at the time I was an abductee, but like many abductees, I slept at the time with my bed up against a wall. I guess it's a psychological thing where we like to have at least one of our flanks covered, but in reality, it doesn't really work because they like to come through the walls or pull you through walls. So I was laying there, and then I looked at the entity, and it said to me, don't worry about it. You're just having a nightmare. Go back to sleep, telepathically. So I turned my head to face the wall. And after a while, I turned my head over to see if the entities were still there, and sure enough, it was still there. And at this point, I clearly recognized another entity, same type of entity at the foot of my bed, and then an entity further back by the bedroom door. And so I closed my eyes again and turned my head towards the wall once again. Then what happened was I opened my eyes. I felt the sensation of movement, and when I opened my eyes, there was what I can only describe as a hideous, grayish female entity that had long black hair and a hideous face, grayish. It was nude. It had mammaries. And by this point, I was pretty immobilized. I could only pinch my eyes shut, and I can only move my head to the left and to the right, but I could not move any other part of my body. And this female entity began simulating intercourse with me. And I just pinched my eyes shut, and I just kind of closed my eyes and was wishing it would go away. And a little while later, I opened my eyes, and it was still there. It was still simulating intercourse. Now, I must stress that from the neck down, I could feel no sensations. I could not move my arms. I could not move my hands. I could only move my head to the left and to the right. And once again, I look over to the being to my right, and it says, once again, just go back to sleep. You're having a nightmare. Don't worry about it. It actually said, don't worry about it. It spoke in the language of the vernacular. So I pinched my eyes shut, And eventually, the experience segued. I found myself up on a ship, and there was a gray in front of me, a reptilian gray in front of me, a reptilian gray to my left, a reptilian gray to my right. And my head was tilted downwards, and I could only see a small circumference or a small radius around me of like a few feet. Really, I could only look down to see the area down near my feet, but I could tell that there was an entity in front and one on either side. And whether I was being floated along or I was kind of ambling along, I don't know. But I was being led down a long, curving corridor. And then we came into an entrance and walked into what I sensed was a very large room. And I was led down the center of this room. And on either side of this room, either side of me as I'm being led down, there are tables. And on these tables are other people, comatose, passed out, nude, partially clothed, what have you. And I can see this in the periphery of my vision because, again, I couldn't turn my head to the left or to the right. I can only see like a small radius around me. I was brought to what I guess was the end of the room and placed on a table. And it was a very plain-looking table. I didn't see any appendages or any tools or any equipment on it. And I was laid on this table, and in a spontaneous fashion, they were somehow able to make me do a bunch of sit-ups, and at times they would flip me over, and all this was without touching me, flip me over onto my belly and make me do like a reverse stomach cruncher where I'd be bent so far back that the back of my head would almost touch my heels. And this went on for some time, and I noticed in the periphery of my vision this taller, kind of bluish entity. And I also saw these smaller brownish entities scurrying back and forth. And in between grunts, I asked this entity, what I perceived to be some kind of a doctor, I asked it, well, what are you doing, right? Mm-hmm. And it said to me, we're taking your energy. And at the time, it didn't really make a lot of sense to me. Only later, after I had moved to San Diego and I joined the San Diego UFO Society, the first real opportunity I had, by the way, to talk to others about this subject, because when I lived in San Jose, all my friends were either in college and they were as dumbed down as me because I was a college person, and all my friends in the neighborhood, none of them really were interested in the subject, so I had no one to talk to about this. Mm-hmm. So when I went to San Diego, I finally had someone to talk to. I asked Sean Atlanti, the founder of the San Diego UFO Society, I go, well, what do you make of that? Why did he say he was taking my energy? And he told me it sounds like they were activating your chakras. And I go, well, that makes sense. And then I've since come to find out that energetic harvesting is a big part of the agenda. We are resonators. We emit frequencies and we emit energies. And it behooves the negatively energized service to self beings to keep us in a low vibratory ebb, and of fear, confusion, anxiety, fear of want, what have you. And they literally feed off us. They feed off us energetically, and they will even go to the trouble of engineering like lower back pain accidents upon people just so they can feed off that energy of anguish, of pain, of hopelessness. Mm-hmm. And that began my journey because I've always been a reader and I've always studied military history. And when I realized that the military was deeply involved in this subject, for example, I realized that many of the same generals, admirals, and scientists involved in these defense so-called related projects, Manhattan Project, for example. When I started seeing the same names turn up in UFO research, the transition for me was instantaneous. It was as easy for me as rolling over in bed, making that transition. And my curiosity overrode whatever fear and anxiety I had. I then began reading as much as I could about the subject, and then I did what I call an inventory of my life. I sat down and I wrote down every type of paranormal, phenomenal experience I had since childhood. And after about 7 pages, I realized, well, this thing has been with me all my life. And then I had a hypnotic regression. Now, at the time, I thought the hypnotic regression was ineffective because I wasn't able to get down deep, and I didn't really remember anything other than what I remembered to begin with, because there were other experiences I'd had besides the one I just described. But a positive outcome did come out of that regression because it kind of shook up my memory banks a little bit, because I was reading a book a couple of days after the regression. I was actually on the verge of finishing it. It's a great book called Project Omega, UFOs, NDEs, and the Mind at Large, written by Dr. Kenneth Ring, if memory serves. And at the end of the book, there was a questionnaire to determine if one, falls into these patterns and categories. And one of the questions, I'll never forget it, was, as a child, do you ever recall having experiences of talking with the little people or little people or beings that no one else could see, right? And I guess because I just had that hypnotic regression and things in my memory banks were shaken up a little bit, upon reading that question, do you ever remember having encounters or discussions with little people or invisible beings? I had this flashback, a clear flashback of when I was about 4 or 5 years old, living in Corpus Christi, Texas. My dad was in the Navy. I was a Navy brat. And my dad was stationed at 2 naval air stations there, Naval Air Station Corpus Christi, and also what is now known as Naval Air Facility Kingsville. And I remember it distinctly. It was the autumn because my mom was in the living room ironing my dad's black uniform. My dad was an enlisted guy. And so in the autumn and the winter, if you're familiar with it, Navy personnel, they wear the dark, especially the enlisted personnel wear the dark uniforms. In the summer, they wear the white uniforms when they're not wearing like dungarees. And so my mom was ironing my dad's black uniform, so it was sometime in the autumn and the winter, and it was dusk in my bedroom, and I remember distinctly it was starting to get dark outside. There was still rays of sunlight coming into my window, and I remember the dust particulates being illuminated by the waning sunlight, right, sun rays. And I was in there playing by myself. I was playing with my toys, and then I noticed there was this little brown entity, and it was hovering. It was not standing on the floor. It was very small, and it was floating. If you ever come across Katarina Wilson's book, Alien Jigsaw Researchers Supplement, I think it's her second book, she has a listing of different types of ETs that people have described, and what she calls a Type 2 gray is very similar to what I saw in my bedroom as a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, but it was brownish, it had round eyes, and its skin was kind of wrinkled. And it said to me, you have some destiny, you will fulfill, you will do all these things in the future, so on and so forth, you're special. And I've since come to find out a lot of ETs tell people this, and so, I mean, really, how special could I be if they tell this to everybody? But anyway, it's telling me that I have this role to fill in the future, and I have this destiny to fulfill, et cetera, et cetera. Now, being a little kid and being very territorial, all I could think was, okay, this entity, whatever it is in my room, and it's going to mess with my stuff. It's going to try to steal my toys. Okay, that was my thought process at the time. And I said, if you don't leave here, I'm going to tell my mom. And it says to me telepathically, go ahead and tell her. She won't be able to see me. So I dashed out of my room and I said, Mom, there's a little, I don't know what I call him. I think I called him a little gray man, even though he was more brownish upon when I look back on it. But I said, there's a little gray man in my room. And she wouldn't come along with me. She was ironing. So I literally grabbed her by the elbow and pulled her into my bedroom. And my bedroom was empty. The entity had left. And then my mom kind of got mad at me. Then she stormed off, went back to the living room. I closed the door, and then the entity reappeared. And it had an expression on its face like I can only describe as "I told you so" expression. And then it looked at me for a moment, and then it disappeared. And that whole memory came back to me because of that question in the Kenneth Ring book, the questionnaire.
Wow.
And for years after that experience, as a growing boy, I told everyone I could about that experience. And then, as is the case with many other abductees, it just mysteriously just disappeared from my conscious waking memory, and I forgot all about it until after that regression and after I read that question. And so that was part of my awakening process too. And going to San Diego and being a part of the San Diego UFO Society, attending conferences throughout the Southwest, in Los Angeles, San Diego, Las Vegas, and places, that really opened me up to a whole field which I never knew existed, and I started networking with like-minded people, and that's really where my journey began.
Wow.
around 1990 to 1992.
That's fascinating. And you'd say, do you consider that to be something of a Mylab then? The event that happened to you?
I would say that I've had experiences later which would fall into that category. Mm-hmm. Yes, especially after I moved to San Diego, because I began networking with others, including Eve Lorgan, a dear friend of mine. I'm sure you've heard about her. She was also via Skype at the Super Soldier Summit, and she and I actually had a Mylab support group. We had two support groups. One was for alien abductees and contactees, or however one wanted to define themselves. And we also had this small core group of Mylabs. And the reason we did that was we found that when you have these abductee support groups, one likes to think that such meetings of like-minded people are always harmonious and always really, they kind of flow, but it's not always the case, because some of the people that for whatever reason they insist on only looking at the positive things in life, and they get really triggered and sometimes can be quite nasty when negative experiences are brought up, kind of at variance when you think about it with the whole love and light message. But a lot of times they would get upset and would start casting aspersions upon those who report having experiences which can be described as negative. And all of the accusations would fly back and forth. Well, you're just spiritually unevolved, you're spiritually retarded, and however they chose to describe these people. And we realized that for the hardcore Mylab issues and reptilian issues, we need to form another group, and that became our Mylab group. And the Mylab group included people from the high desert of Southern California, Victorville, Palmdale, Lancaster, the areas around China Lake like Ridgecrest, Boron, and San Diego and Las Vegas. So we had quite a group. We didn't really have as big a group as the larger abductee group, but we had a nice core group of people that we could talk about anything with. And we really got down to core issues as well. And we were able to bring up reptilian issues because everyone that was in that Mylab group had reptilian experiences. And that was another wake-up call for me, because what I found out very quickly is that the UFO community, and this is probably the case with the whole liberty movement in general, but especially within the UFO community, you have egos and empires, and you have these researchers who push their pet theories. And and especially when it comes to alien abduction research, a lot of these big name alien abduction researchers tend to dilute, water down, and dismiss out of hand the testimony given to them by abductees, especially when it relates to reptilian experiences and military abduction experiences. There was a lot of censoring going on. There was a lot of gatekeeping going on. And I remember Candy Turner, Dr. Carla Turner, was telling me years ago, and she said this publicly, that some of the big-name alien abduction researchers, Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs in particular, especially David Jacobs, they were doing this. And Candy said that she had spoken to people who had been regressed and worked with David Jacobs, and David Jacobs would say to them, "No, that was not a reptilian. There are no such beings as reptilians." In fact, what David Jacobs says is, what you've seen is a hybrid that looks like a reptilian. He never explained, how that could be, though. And then, as far as the military aspect was concerned, Jacobs typically dismissed that out of hand. And over time, I have since spoken with many abductees who were regressed by David Jacobs, and likewise, they told me the same thing, that when these issues came up in and out of regression, Jacobs was quick to point out that, oh, no, that's not a reptilian. It's a being that looks like a reptilian. There are no military people involved in these experiences,
Wow.
which is nonsense, nonsense.
Totally.
And so, yeah, we had this core group, and a lot of these Mylabs were taken underground to beneath Edwards Air Force Base. There's an underground facility there known as Haystack Butte. It's very close, if not connected, to an Air Force laboratory that's deep underground. And there's a facility there that's underground. It's at least an estimate of a mile underground. And then there's this facility called the North Facility at Edwards Air Force Base, where a lot of activity goes on. My labs have been taken to China Lake, both above ground and underground. There's a large genetics lab beneath China Lake where they genetically create all these mutants and all these chimeras, just every kind of variety and description you could think of. It's quite a frightening place. And my labs have been taken down there to intimidate them and to frighten them. And there are other underground bases in the Southwest that really don't have a name, but the locals and the Mylabs know that it's there. They've been taken beneath there. So that was the focus of Eve and my research for many years was the Mylab activity in the Southwest.
Wow. Sounds pretty interesting. And were they physically taken to these locations, or was it something they were going through the mind's eye? How were they getting taken?
It varied. Sometimes they were physically taken there. In the old days, I don't know if they still do this. Sometimes they would show up in a white van during the day, especially in the high desert where a lot of those communities are very remote anyway. Places like Hemet and places like Apple Valley and Victorville is still pretty, desolate place for the most part. And especially in the outlying parts of town, they would just show up after the husband went to work, for example. They would show up in a white van, and oftentimes they would have what looks like a black box. And many Mylabs have described this, a black box sometimes with wires sticking out of it. And the black box would emit a frequency that would render everyone except the targeted Mylab unconscious, and this included pets, dogs, cats, it didn't matter. And they would render everyone unconscious, and they would take the Mylab and they would bring them out to the van. Sometimes they would bring them to a corporate office setting somewhere in town, or they would take them to an underground facility or an above ground, like a remote part of an above ground facility.
Wow.
What they would do also is they would, at nighttime, right before the Mylab was going to sleep, they would ring them up on the phone. And when the Mylab would answer, they would hear someone on the other end start speaking a series of numbers and like a coded designation, numbers and some phrases, but especially numbers. And then the Mylab would go into a trance state, hang the phone up, and in their night clothes, they would walk out into the front yard, and there would be the white van and the military people, and they would take the person away. And what's been described sometimes as they're being driven along, they start to become more lucid, and they begin to notice that the car is gradually going downhill, and eventually they wind up in an underground base. Other times they would utilize a helo, a helicopter. Leah Haley talks about this, and others, where a helicopter, especially in a remote location, would land right on the grounds of the property, and they would go in and they would haul the abductee out. And other times they would use alien replicated vehicles. Some of these craft could be quite large. They would land a team down, and they would bring the Mylab out, and they would they float them up to the craft, or they would levitate them to the or they would beam them up to the craft. Nowadays, some of the more advanced Mylab control groups, and I don't really believe they all have the same access to the same technology. I believe, and this is just speculation, but I believe some have more highly advanced technology than others, but they all generally have quite high technology at their disposal. And they literally just teleport people nowadays, at least certain Mylabs that are under the control of certain military groups. They're teleported to the underground facilities. And the Mylab settings, they vary from an underground base, a remote part of a surface installation, or like a wooded location, oftentimes along a shore, like along a beach. And the Mylabs are put through their paces with running, endless amounts of running, training, weapons training. A lot of the training for certain Mylabs seems to be of the escape and evasion variety, survival skills, how to forage. And they've been told, at least some of the Mylabs, that exactly what Dan Sherman describes in his book, Project Preserve Destiny, that there will come a point in time when things on the surface are going to be quite hairy. And Dan Sherman says that he was told by his superiors in Air Force Security Service, which is the Air Force's branch of the NSA, that there will be a time when electronics and communications will no longer work on the surface. So that was the justification they gave him when they plugged him into his program, where he had to telepathically communicate with the Zetas. And the relevance here is that it seems to me that these military controllers' intention behind training all these Mylabs in survival skills is perhaps they will not have the ability to teleport them underground or wherever they need to be. In fact, they tell these Mylabs, don't go with the military. When everyone's being rounded up by the military, don't go with everyone else. In fact, they've been told to disguise their young girls as young boys, and to not allow yourself to be separated from your children. Now, to me, knowing just who these surface level controllers are and how demented they are, disguising a young girl into a young boy isn't really going to do much good, considering how so many of them favor young boys. But they've basically been told, and they've been shown futuristic visions of people being herded into trains and being sent off to camps. And some of these Mylab control groups have time travel capability. They absolutely do. There's no two ways about it. But what people must understand is some of these Mylab control groups, they've always strived to attain the same technological capabilities as the more advanced ET races. And I must say that, the Zetas, their technology, the Zeta Greys, is very run-of-the-mill compared to some of the other ET groups, both positive and negative. Some of the really advanced, spiritually evolved ET groups, their technology is crystalline, it's organic in nature. So when we're talking about Zeta technology, it's almost kind of bottom-of-the-barrel stuff. When it comes right down to it, but it's still centuries ahead of what we see on the surface. But it seems to me that they know they won't be able to access their Mylabs when the time comes, and the apocalyptic scenarios they've been shown in future visions, if you will, range from nuclear missiles to fireballs coming out of the sky to global coastal events, seismic activity, and the bottom line is it's going to create massive civil unrest, and the powers that be will really clamp down and begin rounding people up. And so these Mylabs have been told under no circumstances go with them, with the military on the surface. In fact, they've been trained and given instruction on how to find entrances to the underground facilities. So, I don't know if I should have said that, but
no, that's good you did, and actually you confirm a lot with me. The funny thing, not to interrupt you, I just wanted to. It's funny because with my induction, it was very similar, except for the fact that it was all live feed, real time, synthetic telepathy. But I was trained the same way you're mentioning exactly the same way with the running and the the training and survival.
Endless running, yes,
Every single thing you're
endless.
mentioning is actually exactly, with the
Yeah,
exception of being taken in a van away physically. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah.
long distance swimming. And some people will say, well, I'm not a strong swimmer, but in these scenarios, they can swim and swim. And some of it involves being underwater and being put in tanks where they seem to be able to breathe in these tanks.
Mm-hmm.
Like oftentimes the liquid seems to be like a gelatinous kind of liquid. I liken it to, if you're familiar with the kind of clear gel you would find at a beautician's place, right? It's kind of similar to that, but when the Mylab gets out of these tanks, they're completely dry. The stuff doesn't stick to their skin. Sometimes it could be pinkish or amber, like a pinkish or amber tint to it.
Mm-hmm.
But likewise, they can breathe while immersed in this liquid. Or they're also trained to do long distance swimming underwater. Sometimes just swimming, or sometimes holding on to some kind of powered kind of underwater sled device. So it varies. And some of the training actually takes place not only off-world in off-world installations, but some of these advanced Mylab control groups, they've actually carved out niches for themselves on other planes entirely. Because as Tesla said, everything comes down to frequency and resonance. And like some of these beings, they're not just extraterrestrial. They have the ability to access other planes and other dimensions. Mm-hmm. Bill Hamilton, one of the great Southern California researchers, one of his sources was a guy who was a technical sergeant in the Marines and took part in a crash retrieval of a craft in Vietnam in 1958. And within that craft was a device that was described as I think it was called a transspatial resonator. It allows the occupants of the craft to change the settings, the resonance of the craft, so the craft and all the occupants resonate with an entirely different universe. And it's been described like the following. Think of two universes side by side as bubbles, and then you have this little membrane, like a thin membrane separating the two. What the transspatial resonator allows is the craft to resonate at the frequency of the other universe, the other plane or universe, to allow them to go into this other universe. So these beings, some of them come from entirely different universes, entirely different planes and dimensions. There's been efforts over the years to create fault lines and spread disinformation about how it's only interdimensional. Jacques Vallée was instrumental in this. Mm-hmm. And by doing so, he neatly sidesteps the hardware aspect to the UFO subject, because over the years, as you know, there have been literally countless crashed retrievals of technology which did not originate on this planet, and also an ongoing interaction between deep black elements of the military aerospace community and non-human entities in these underground installations, above ground installations, and off-world settings. Mm-hmm. And getting back to my original point, some of these military control groups, through a variety, either with high-tech and or ritualistic means, have been able to open portals and stargates, and they go into these other realms, if you will. And time doesn't pass the same way in those other realms as they do on our plane. For example, Mylabs that I know, and the Mylabs that contact me tend to be in the really high-tech, super advanced weird science projects. And these Mylabs are taken to these other realms and trained by the military for what seem like days and weeks, even weeks, as time seems to flow in these other realms. And they will say to their controllers, look, I've got to get back. My children are going to get up in the morning. I have to feed them. I have to get them ready to school. I have to take them to school. And they always tell them, don't worry, we'll send you back just in time, no problem. And after spending what seems like days or weeks in this other realm training and doing all those other things, when they send them back, they get up just in time to get their kids ready to work, to go to school, feed them, and drive them to school. And like no time has passed at all sometimes. And the ETs can do this too. The ETs have on board their craft some of the more advanced types. in the UFO lore, it's not uncommon for a craft to appear over a very busy plaza or a city square, and then hit a button or something, and everyone and everything within this particular window is stuck in freeze frame. The birds, the people, everyone are in lockstep, in mid-step, and except for one or two people that they want to interact with, right? Then when they're through interacting with these one or two people, they turn on their device again, and then everyone just goes back into normal motion, and there seems to have been no time loss. It's a seamless transition. And some of the certainly the reptilians have this, and the hybrids that really have reptilian consciousness within them. They also have a handheld device where they can go into a restaurant and they can activate the handheld device, and everyone freezes. And then they will. A lot of times they do this as an object lesson to show how much control they have to the abductee they're messing with. Mm-hmm. And then they'll say things to the abductee, see what we can do, blah, 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 etc. And then after their point is made, they hit the button again, and everyone starts talking. And these are human hybrids who have reptilian consciousness within them. Mm-hmm. So that's just another facet of this, that it's gone from being abducted in vans and in helicopters and taken up in alien replicated vehicles, some of which at times, some of the crews of these alien replicated vehicles also have ETs or greys or similar type beings. They're not just entirely piloted by human military. And to now, they're just teleporting people here and there and taking them to other realms where time doesn't even pass the same way as it does here. And some of these realms look like installations, but they also look like what appears to be like a manor or an estate in the country somewhere. And so they give themselves plush surroundings. Even in the underground bases, they have quite plush surroundings in some of their places. But also in these other planes, they've established niches for themselves. So that's going on too.
Oh, that's really incredible. It's just blowing me away. Insofar as the Mylabs go, what is the motive behind recruiting Mylab abductees? I mean, what are they really trying to do or accomplish?
These Mylabs are operational assets because these Mylabs have DNA, sometimes from a number of different ETs, not just one, and because they come from certain bloodlines, the common ones you always hear: Scotch, Celtic, Irish, Native American, so on and so forth, Eastern European, Russian. I mean, it varies because of the generational management of these family trees. What the ETs, positive and negative, do, especially the reptilians, where they ensure that all these people have a preponderance of reptilian DNA, because they psychology follows neurology, which follows genetics. So there's certain Mylabs that project people in general that fit a certain psychological profile that they like to categorize and slot Mylabs into certain categories for certain purposes. Some people are not suited to be assassins or to be military operatives. They're more suited to be administrative, medical, or data mining or that kind of thing. It varies. It depends on what their skill set is that they bring to the table. And because DNA from these different ET races retains the morphic resonance from these different ET races, and because the DNA contains a genetic memory and in some cases like metaphysical powers, the different ET races and the military utilize these Mylabs as operational assets, and they exploit these latent metaphysical abilities, whether it's remote viewing, basically things that shamans, seers, yogis, and medicine men, medicine women can do. They look for people that have these innate capabilities. One of them, a friend of mine named Diane Johnson, she's gone public with a story. I lost contact with her over the years. She was told it was the Navy and the Air Force that manipulated her. 1 week the Air Force would grab her, the next week the Navy would take her. Air Force would take her to George Air Force Base, and then next week the Navy would take her to China Lake or some other place. They told her that there's a certain gland in her brain which has atrophied in most other people, but is still strong in her particular bloodline, and her particular family, and in her in particular. And this particular gland in her brain secretes a certain kind of hormone, and the hormone, when released, engenders a variety of metaphysical abilities, remote viewing, astral travel, so on and so forth. And they've used her for remote viewing. When you hear people like Ed Dames and Joe McMoneagle and Mel Riley said, oh, well, it all started back with SRI, Stanford Research Institute, and all that. No, that's the surface level stuff. Mylabs, against their will, and the project people in general, against their will, have been tasked with remote viewing going back to the 60s at least. At least. I know of cases where the military have held in detention an entire multi-generational family. In 1954 in Indiana, Barbara Bartholic and Candy Turner investigated this, were held in a farmhouse by the military for 3 days after a family abduction. The military showed up and they sequestered the family in there, and they did all these radiation tests on the property, so on and so forth. So at least back to the 50s and the 40s, they were already aware that certain people were having these experiences. So what they do is they utilize these Mylabs as operational assets. They exploit these metaphysical abilities, oftentimes in altered states of being, altered personalities, and they're used physically at times, literally combat training, so on and so forth, and sometimes in an off-world setting where they're literally tasked with combating and killing other beings. I can only speculate, but it seems to me that perhaps it's a case where they want to take over a certain place for whatever reason, minerals, whatever the case may be, and these troublesome beings are already there. So they, as part of the training, they turn these Mylabs loose on them, and sometimes they'll use conventional weaponry. Sometimes they'll use quite advanced beam weaponry, and other times these Mylabs will utilize metaphysical abilities, generating energies from their hands, from their minds, and so on and so forth. So, and also they're utilized not only in their physical bodies, but they're utilized astrally. Some of them are astral operators, where you talk about synthetic telepathy. Some of the controllers themselves are what amount to adepts. Some of them are very psychic and telepathic. But I also believe, like you point out, that they have technology which boosts, for lack of a better term, their telepathy. And so when they astrally send these astral operatives to some place on the surface, beneath the surface, or whatever the case may be, the controller can speak into the minds of these astral operators as clear as day, and they give them instructions and they tell them what to do. So that goes on, and remote viewing, of course, and it runs the gamut. Now, some of these Mylabs can interface with alien technology, because the ETs utilize Mylabs as well as deep black elements of the military. So on purely ET-controlled ops with not a human military person in sight, the ETs will take people on these space ops, clear somewhere in the cosmos on a space station or on a spaceship somewhere. And the ETs may look human, they may look non-human, but whatever the case may be, the Mylabs are the only humans from Earth on the craft, and they are tasked with all these different missions. Sometimes, it varies. They can take over other ships, or it could be a rescue operation, or whatever the case may be. The Mylabs can interface with certain types of ET technology. They can read alien script. They can operate alien technology. Many Mylabs have been taught to fly craft. And the craft can vary from small kind of probe-type craft to much larger craft. And the controls could look like a simple joystick device to like a crystalline kind of controls. It varies. So Ben Rich says anything that you can imagine we can already do. And he knew quite a lot. People really should pay attention to what he said about the breakaway civilization, as Dolan describes it.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you 100% on that. Boy, everything you're saying really rings true, let me tell you, especially after going through the type of induction that I went through. That's really interesting about the technology, and I totally resonate with that for sure. So that's just blowing me away. There's so many things I want to ask you, and I'm trying to. You talked.
Please.
You talked a little bit about. I know, but I want to hear you talk too. You spoke about the detention, the astral detention. I wonder.
Yes,
we're going to head for a break in a few minutes, but let's go ahead and start with that a little bit. That's very intriguing.
Okay. Okay. What a number of Mylabs, and I should preface this by saying my definition of a Mylab is a person who is a legitimate alien abductee, who also in just about every case that I'm aware of, especially the people that contact me, they almost invariably have reptilian experiences. But it runs a gamut. Some people have reptilian experiences. Some people also have experiences with very benevolent, spiritually evolved beings. You see, these Mylabs and abductees in general, they're caught in a cosmic tug of war where negative beings are trying to access them and have them do their bidding and trying to destabilize their lives in one way or another. And these benevolent beings are also working and running interference with them and trying to protect them and trying to help them develop their abilities. And I'll continue the point about the astral detention when we get back.
Absolutely. Okay, we'll be right back with Ravenstar's Witching Hour and James Bartley. Stay tuned.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Intuitive improvisation is the secret of genius.
I want to break free.
Oh, I see.
I put my pants on, just like the rest of you, one leg at a time.
I guess I'll have to watch.
Guess what? I got a fever. And the only prescription is more caca.
I turned cities into salt.
Oh, okay.
You gotta come work for me.
Right.
I could get you in now. You love it. Nobody tells you when to go to bed.
You want to call in, sure.
All day, all night.
If you want to fight or you got something more important.
You eat all the ice cream you want.
I'll take that too.
You're talking to me all wrong. It's the wrong tone.
I know all these people. I don't know all these people.
Is there anybody out there?
So, oh, I see. Right. Yeah, I'm challenged.
Changing reality with the hijacker.
Monday through Thursday at midnight. Be there. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Enjoy your extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another?
Extra big-ass fries.
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
trouble.
trouble.
Come on. My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
Imagine no longer being tied down to your computer, but having the freedom to take live talk radio with you anywhere you go. TalkStream Live introduces our first ever iPhone application. The talk shows you follow now follow you, and your iPhone is now the fastest and easiest way to stay connected to the best talk radio on the internet. Let TalkStream Live transform the way you listen to radio. Listen to live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Mobile talk radio from TalkStream Live. Now available in the iTunes App Store.
How dare you, sir? How dare you? No, how dare you? No, how dare you? How dare you? No, how dare you? You dare condemn me? How dare you? How dare me when how dare you? You big peepee head.
Hello all, thanks for tuning in to Revolution Radio. We are the #1 public access, commercial-free internet talk radio station on the web, with between 12 and 16 hours of live programming per day, bringing you news, politics, entertainment, and just plain human interactive talks with our extremely informative and successful nightly open caller roundtables. And how do we do this? Through the support of volunteers and donations from good listeners like you. So if you're digging what you hear, and we are bringing you an entertaining and informative service, please visit our site support page and donate to the cause. Keep us live, keep us kicking, help us bring you the talk. We are already here. Help keep us here. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Revolution Radio!
How the pressure! How to get naked! I can't do it!
Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? Family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Imagine no longer being tied down to your computer, but having the freedom to take live talk radio with you anywhere you go. TalkStream Live introduces our first ever iPhone application. The talk shows you follow now follow you. And your iPhone is now the fastest and easiest way to stay connected to the best talk radio on the internet. Let TalkStream Live transform the way you listen to radio. Listen to live talk shows 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Mobile talk radio from TalkStream Live. Now available in the iTunes App Store.
Revolution Radio. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome back, everybody, to Ravenstar's Witching Hour with my special guest, James Bartley. If you'd like to call in, the number is 347-688-2902 or Freedom Screen on Skype. And James, you there?
Yes.
All right. And let's go ahead and, I know we were talking about that astral detention, which I found very interesting. So I'll let you go ahead and continue on.
What astral detention is, for lack of a better term, is when Mylabs or other project people find themselves at night in an astral state, and they find themselves in a virtual environment which they cannot get out of. And the setting, the virtual environment, could be something that looks like simulated to look like a nightclub with a couple of double doors leading into it. There could be tables set up, fake palm trees, a stage, what appears to be a stage for a live band. And they're just stuck in there. And they're conscious. They're aware that they're in this place. They know it's not a dream. They can't get themselves to wake up. They can't find a way to get out. And it becomes a real problem for some people when they find themselves in this kind of scenario. Often, like sometimes night after night after night, they find themselves in a place, the same place oftentimes, a virtual environment which they seem to not be able to get out of. Sometimes they will see what appear to be guards, and the uniforms could be simulated to look like a police uniform or a security guard uniform, and they will sometimes act quite aggressively towards the person in astral detention and try to intimidate them and mess with them. But the anxiety really comes about because the person can't seem to leave. They can't seem to get out of there. They can't seem to escape. And the settings can vary. One of the settings is what appears to be a city where the person in astral detention can walk, and they can walk and go in and out of a lot of buildings and homes, what seem to be like apartments. They can go into a lot of deserted tenement buildings, a lot of warehouses. And when they get to what seems to be the edge of town, they always find that they're walled in. And when they get up to the wall itself and look around, they see that they're inside of a walled city, and there are other people there too. They're not alone, and it seems to be another virtual environment where nobody seems to be able to get out of these places. And the way time passes, you're not only in the moment, but time seems in a linear fashion to really drag on, and this intensifies the sense of being trapped, the sense of not being able to get out. And in these large walled-in cities, someone could walk clear over to the other side of the city, and they find the same thing. It's a big walled-in enclosure where the city is. It's all walled in. And try as they might, they can't get out. And eventually they wake up in the morning and they say to themselves, well, it's another one of those dreams, right? But then, like that night or another night, it happens again. They find themselves in the same big walled-in city, and they can't get out. Other settings seem to be what appears to be an underground base, but it's a large circular corridor. And the other denizens of this place, they seem to look like, well, this is just outward appearances, perception. They seem to be like transients, homeless people, drug addicts, people that society has really kind of let slip through the cracks. And I don't know if they have created this this particular illusion of people looking like that, or they really are people that, you know, are from that demographic, at least astrally.
Right.
But the person will find himself walking in this endless corridor. People are going forwards, people are passing them, and they seem to be going in a big circle. Now there are rooms, annexes, and they go into these rooms, and they find like storage rooms where there's things on the floor. Everything seems to be older, dilapidated. There seems to be equipment, electronic equipment, but it's all old and dilapidated from what we would perceive to be like decades old technology from the 50s and 60s. There's like crates and boxes stacked up. And even in the main circular corridor, there's just junk laying around. And the person finds themselves in this place night after night after night, and they begin to dread going to sleep, actually, because they worry about because they know they're a Mylab, and they know that astral abductions do occur because ETs astrally abduct people, as do deep black elements of the military. They simply lock into the resonant frequency of the person's astral body, and they just pull them to anywhere they want to take them. Now, what I'm starting to hear is that not only Mylabs and project people are finding themselves in these astral detention places, however the virtual reality is simulated to look, but even activists, people in a certain genre of truth research, if you will, whether it's this, that, or the other subject, because they're very noisy and from the standpoint of the controllers, troublesome. They're starting to find themselves in these astral detention settings night after night after night. Now, the people that I've spoken to that have managed to, you know, make this stop, they were fortunate in that they were connected to very gifted, world-class psychics, mediums, and healers. And these people were able to break these connections in some cases. And ETs, interdimensional entities, and negative entities in general, some of your more mediumistic, shamanistic friends have probably described this to you. They create these attachments that appear to a psychic person as like a hose or a tentacle or something, which affixes either to this reality or attaches to a person, right? To their ethereal body, to their astral body, whatever the case may be. And so what these healers have done is they've broken off these connections and these attachments and healed them energetically, so they don't have this problem anymore. But I'm throwing it out there because more and more people are starting to describe this. I do believe there are factions of Mylab controllers, that they're not all working on the same page, the same sheet of music, like any surface level intelligence agency. I believe each of these, some of these deep black Mylab control groups are trying to carve out their own niche and expand their own power base, and not only survive but actually get stronger. So it's all about empire building. And when they train these Mylabs to survive on the surface in the event of any number of contingencies, it's not for altruistic purposes. It's not because they're humanitarians. It's because they've spent a lot of time and resources training these Mylabs, and they are loath for these Mylabs to wind up in some detention center or camp or quarantined or vaccinated to death, right? They see them as their own assets. So I think also what happens, I know what happens is the controllers from other groups like to access Mylabs and project people that are under the control of other groups. This happens quite often, actually, where Mylabs will meet online or at a conference, and each one is being manipulated and controlled by a different group, a different branch of the service, a different black op Mylab control group. And when one group or the other finds out, they go, oh, so-and-so has met like Jill, and Jill is a Mylab, and from another group, and they start accessing Jill, and they start using her in ops, Mylab ops with Jack, let's say, together. So that what they've done is temporarily accessed a Mylab from another project. That happens quite a bit too.
Right.
There seems to be an umbrella organization that is aware of all these different Mylab operations that run in parallel to each other, but there also seems to be some rivalry involved. There's empire building, it seems to me, and the Mylab control groups have alliances with different ET groups, and that's part of what's going on also. So I can easily see how one group or another, for whatever reason, can want to pull Mylabs into these astral detention settings for whatever reason.
Right.
Because it can generate a lot of anxiety. And part of the agenda also is for certain types of Mylabs, they like them to be in an emotional state of anxiety, confusion, anger, and rage, because it allows them to utilize them for specific purposes, to use them better, if you will, for whatever reason.
Right. Well, it sounds like a frequency fence to me. I mean, so far as
I couldn't figure it out. It sounds like the opposite of like a Faraday cage. Like they created like a frequency fence. That's a great way to describe it. I'm going to use that, but I'm going to say I got it from you. Okay.
Or a containment field, yeah.
Or a containment field,
no,
yes.
But that's what it sounds like to me. I mean, even with the lower astral planes, there's always a way to punch a hole through those things. I mean, have they figured it out insofar as how to psychically break through these barriers besides working with world-class healers? Or
I think that the Mylabs that have that are really metaphysically developed and are very heart-centered, and their solar plexus, their heart chakra, everything is working in sync. They've blocked out, they've removed all the meridian blockages and ethereal implants and whatnot. The ones that basically have a lot of positive energy and a lot of chi that they can summon on command, they can break out, I'm pretty sure, because as you know, with astral operators, they can basically go anywhere, but every once in a while they'll run into a containment field, or they'll run into some other force field where they have problems. So I would think that they're really highly energized, really heart-centered people that are very adept, if you will. They can break out. It's the people that haven't developed their abilities to that level that'll have problems.
I agree. Yeah, makes perfect sense. And we have a caller here. I believe it's
Olive.
Oh, sure. Are you
there?
there?
Hi, Olive.
Hello, how's it going?
Hey. Good.
Well, I'm glad you took my call, because today I wasn't able to get through.
Oh, my goodness. Okay.
On another station, they wouldn't allow me to call in. Just in time wouldn't let me call in. So.
All right. Well, you better behave yourself then.
I don't know what I did. I was glad you.
Alrighty.
I was able to get through here.
Yeah.
Anyway, so James, what you saw, was it in a hologram?
What experience or in what context?
Your experiences, like with the Mylabs and the astral planes, is what you saw was like, okay, let me just tell you what happened with me real quick. It'd be like 1 minute. I had an experience on 3309 where I was at the house and I was laying in there in bed, and I looked up, and then I saw, like a 15-foot man and about a 12-foot woman. And then on the left, I saw like an alien-like being. But it was in a hologram, and like the doctor looking over me, the earth shook. This happened for 3 days. I remember the earth shook for around 8 hours, and a dragon went up on my right hand, a little dragon. And during this time, all this was a hologram, except for where the military came after it. A helicopter came from the sky. I didn't see it. I just heard the commotion out front. I looked out there and there's a bunch of police cars and just around the neighborhood for some reason. And all of a sudden I went down and asked them what was going on. And a neighbor said a helicopter just came straight down out of the sky, you know, and it had no sound. But that was before I started understanding a little bit more. But like in the Gospel of Mary, it talks about where Jesus said that that visions are not seen by the spirit or the soul, but by the mind, which is in between the two. So I'm thinking some of these things could be mind energy, which is alien creation, and heart energy, which is source energy creation.
What do you think, James?
Yes, that happens also. It's up in the air whether some Mylab experiences are in our physical body, and I'll get to this later. But also, a lot of training is done in clones, where they put our consciousness into cloned bodies, because the training or the ops are hazardous, and people can get maimed and killed. But that's another story. I'll talk about that later. But some of the training, it's up in the air whether it was done in a virtual environment or it was done astrally, because as you know, even in these astral settings, there's a degree of physicality. I mean, there's density. There's furniture. There's objects that you bump into a chair or a table. Even in an astral setting, it'll make a screeching sound when it slides across the floor. So it goes back to what Tesla said about resonance and frequency. And when these people are in these training, let's say, for example, in our example, it's done in an astral / virtual environment. The Mylab could be sleeping, but their consciousness has been taken elsewhere, and they're trained astrally, even though they're on foot a lot of the times and they're moving around. I believe a lot of the astral abductions, Mylab abductions, are also done astrally, where it may seem like there's a bunch of other Mylabs walking around, and the hallways of this facility are teeming with other Mylabs. Some of that is physical, but also some of it, I believe, is astral. And so they're put through their paces and all this training, and it's done like in a alternate persona, a state-dependent persona, if you will, where they seem to know what to do in these virtual environments, that they develop this whole skill set of abilities and know-how and wisdom to operate in these training scenarios or in these ops. But really, they're just laying in bed the whole time. If you looked at them, their physical body is in bed, but their consciousness and their astral body, at least, is elsewhere. So that goes on. And another thing that goes on too is the military and the ETs and the reptilians do this too, where they will electronically beam the frontal lobe of the sleeping person. The frontal lobe is the impulse safety net. It keeps us from acting out in aberrant or violent ways, physically and emotionally. So they electromagnetically beam the frontal lobe and begin to wear it down. And while the person is sleeping, the person's consciousness, they find themselves in a virtual environment, which is a training and conditioning environment where they're always being attacked by everybody. Crowds of people attacking them left, right, and center, and they're forced to defend themselves and fight and flee. And there's a parallel manipulation where they're made to feel sensations in their face, where they're being battered about the face, battered about the side of the head in their physical body. So it adds to this feeling of frustration, anxiety, this animalistic fear. And what they're trying to do is promote this animalistic fear and aggression, because when the person's in the virtual environment, they're just being attacked and set upon by crowds everywhere they go. No matter where they run, there's always another group of people that are ready to attack them. And by the end of those scenarios, inanimate objects begin to attack them. If they're standing too close to a white picket fence or to drapery or something, the inanimate objects become animated and wrap themselves. That's another sensation the person feels. They feel like they're being jostled. They feel like they're being grabbed, and people are wrapping their arms around them. So they have a sensation of their face and the side of their head being battered about, slapped, and they feel that they're having people wrap their arms around them and kicking them. And so all this generates this animalistic fear and aggression.
Right.
But it's all a virtual reality. It's all a virtual environment. They're conditioning the person to be very impulsive and be very violent.
Wouldn't you say that's like a psychotronic program as well? Is that what you call a virtual?
Yeah, I would say so, because
Okay.
the person is lying in bed, and it's a virtual environment, and it's stage managed scenarios, as I call it. So psychotronic is a good way to describe it. But they have the means to add the physical sensations too.
Right. Yeah, sense
That's
around.
a key part
Lovely.
of it.
Ugh. Oh. Well, Olive, does that answer your question?
I don't know if I answered your question, but
yeah, sort of. So would you agree that this energy that they're producing, this pain, suffering energy, they must be feeding off it, sort of like the Archon gods like to feed off of pain energy like a drug.
absolutely, we are resonators, and it's all about energy. Well, part of it is energetic harvesting at our expense, and it's not just. This is why society in general is constantly hammering us with negativity in the entertainment industry and the mass media. It's all about fear. It's all about promoting boorishness and stupidity and all these non-reality shows, as I call them. It makes being boorish and stupid very, very trendy and very chic. And so we're constantly being hammered with this, and all of it results in us being in a lower vibratory ebb. Plus you add on the psychiatric pharmacological tyranny, the chem spraying and the GMO food. Everything is designed to keep us at a low ebb. And by so doing, they feed off us, they destabilize us, they disrupt our lives, and it keeps us in a state where we can't reintegrate, we can't heal, we can't move forward. So it's important for people out there to really disengage from negative people, because if they can't directly mess with you, they will work through the people around you. They will even insert negative people that under our conscious control into your life. Mm-hmm. And these people will drag you down and then just pull you into one psychodrama after another. And we're not at our best in that state. They want us in this lower vibratory ebb, because it's easier to manipulate us all across the board.
I'll go now, Solaris, but I just wanted to say that was my question, because it seems like the energy, they need that energy from it, the spirit energy that they're missing, that they want.
Yes.
Okay.
And I can say from my personal standpoint, when I've been the most angriest at the reptilians and this whole reptilian overlordship, that's when I had my worst experiences. That's when they really ganged up on me. And when my emotions were amped up of negative emotions, that's when my experiences were the worst. So I've learned to really stay heart-centered, really retain the inner harmony no matter what happens around me.
Makes sense. And thanks, Olive, for calling in tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Solaris, for having me. And James, take care and thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care. Very good question. Thank you.
Yeah, a very good question. And also, we have another caller here at 940. Hello?
Yes. Hi.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, my name's Ed.
Hi, Ed.
Hi, Solaris. Hi, James.
How you doing, Ed?
Good. You were getting into the topic I was going to ask about. I followed your work for quite a while. I think you were one of the tops in the field, and you were shunned by the UFO community a number of years ago for your outspokenness. And
true.
they're still trying to catch up to you, my friend.
Well, there are pioneers that went before me. Barbara Bartholic, Dr. Candy Turner.
Absolutely.
Eve Lorgan is another great one, and so it's a cooperative
She's
effort.
also one of my favorites. I was wanting you to kind of talk about the hosting a little bit more, and
that's a fundamental aspect. It even plays into the whole Mylab scenario too.
And absolutely, and what's going on in our reality today that we're perceiving as our reality, with all this electronic
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
pollution.
727, can you mute, please? We'll be with you in a second. Thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I followed the work of Dr. William Baldwin on spirit releasement therapy also, and there's many others in the field that are doing similar techniques for releasement of attachments. But it seems like we're being totally bombarded. Anyone who becomes spiritually awoken is vectored upon by the hyperdimensional control system, and if you could speak a little bit about that, I think your work on that is really top-notch.
I'll go from the general to the specific. The veils are thinning. The membranes between worlds are thinning. The frequency is speeding up of this plane, despite the best efforts of the controllers. And that's allowing a lot of negative intelligences, negative beings from lower planes access into our world. They already have been here, and they already worked through a lot of these hybrid bloodlines, and there's a lot of naturally occurring vortexes and portals anyway. But in general, things are speeding up big time. And part of the reason for the amping up of the fear vibe, the rage vibe, and amping up all these wars and whatnot is specifically to generate this negative energy field, because these negative beings, I'm convinced that what's happening in our world, in our little corner of the multiverse, will have a profound influence on other planes in other dimensions. And these archontic forces are doing their level best to keep not only this world from ascending, but each and every one of us, because there are billions of souls on this planet. It's not the DNA is the currency of the universe. Again, within the DNA are all these innate metaphysical abilities and the genetic, spiritual, ancestral memory of all these, not only our own past lives, but from past lives before we were even Terrans, and going back to other star systems, so on and so forth. So that's part of the agenda. That big part of it is to basically flip the chi of this whole plane into a negative chi and plunge this whole plane. And I hate to say this because it sounds so profoundly negative, but to plunge this whole plane into a very dark place. And they're pushing up against a celestial timetable. This is why the reptilian overlords are shooting for all the marbles, why they're pulling out all the stops, because, and of course there are beings behind the reptilians too, but they're like, they seem to be the big time players in advancing this agenda. Because the controllers know that the celestially driven cataclysms are coming back. We are on the cusp once again. Every 12,500, 13,000 years, we have these cataclysms, whether it's the galactic superwave that Dr. Paul Laviolette talks about, these very large comets, if you're familiar with Dr. James McCanney's plasma comet discharge model, yes. And so on and so forth. That's happening again. And the poles have already shifted a tremendous distance just in the last 200 years. Sinkholes opening up all over the place, fireballs falling out of the sky. If there wasn't a perma chemtrail haze above us, people would be seeing this what looks like a second sun up there, okay? Because we're in that 3,700 year time loop again, time cycle, when this mini solar system is coming back and it's already in the solar system. So all these things are happening simultaneously. And the controllers know that. And so they're getting everything in place, because there's going to be a mass culling. And they want to put themselves in the best possible position to take advantage, to be able to ride out the storm, if you will, and be able to retain control. And it's up to us to ensure that whether these cataclysms are 100 or 200 years from now or sooner, in geologic terms, that's a blink of an eye. It's upon us, and we just as individuals and collectively just have to make sure that we put ourselves in the best possible position, spiritually, metaphysically, emotionally, etc., so that no matter what happens, come what may, individually we'll be able to make the transition to whatever comes next. And we also have a responsibility that when the survivors come out of their caves again, and begin life anew on the surface, that we cannot allow these archontic forces, reptilian beings in particular, to once again genetically manipulate the survivors of these cataclysms, imbue their loathsome characteristics and attributes genetically into the survivors, foist once again patriarchal, monotheistic religions, custodial religions upon these people, and start this whole process over again. So I believe we have a responsibility, if it gets to that point, to not let this happen, to leave an institutional memory where those people that survive don't have to figure all this stuff out for themselves. Because these cataclysms happen again and again. The Egyptians in their ancient texts talk about their civilization being 36,000 years old. Exactly what John Anthony West says. It's a legacy civilization. And so the Egyptians knew that these cataclysms come every so often, and society on the surface gets reduced back to the very basic levels, and then civilization develops again anew. So to get back to the point about the hosting, where that all factors in, by imbuing their genetics into the survivors after the most recent series of cataclysms, they have attained control of the surface populations, and they've created this elite ruling bloodline, which essentially acts as the plantation managers on the surface. The David Icke hypothesis, if you will. And David Icke has done a tremendous job getting the word out about the reptilian overlordship. No one could have done a better job. And through these astronomer priests, through these fraternal orders. Now, there were two streams initially. There was this occulted, i.e. hidden stream of people who wanted to preserve the ancient stellar wisdom from the past, carry it into the present, post all these cataclysms. Well, when these hybridized bloodlines were created, they subsumed most of these secret societies that were trying to preserve that ancient stellar wisdom. And fast forwarding to today, we have these ruling elite bloodlines, because when the reptilians genetically manipulated all these bloodlines, they've created people who have a genetic, spiritual predisposition to being taken up as a host for these reptilian entities. These reptilians are masters of frequency and resonance. They can densify not only themselves, but densify particular parts of their anatomy. For example, when they're sexually assaulting a woman or sodomizing a male, they may appear invisible in the visible spectrum, but the woman, in our example, feels weight upon her chest, cannot see anything. The entity is invisible, but it can densify its member, and somehow it can densify its member so it penetrates layers of bed sheets and bed clothing and rapes and or sodomizes the woman. If she's able to move her hands, let's say, she may try to block said member from vaginally or anally penetrating her, but paradoxically, when she places her hand over her genitals, she feels nothing. Paradoxically, she still feels the member like raping her. Okay, so they're able to even densify particular parts of their anatomy, and what they do is, because these people have a genetic predisposition to being taken up as a host, along with promoting drug abuse, particularly crystal methadone or the variant crank, those kinds of amphetamines have a sympathetic resonance to the reptilians and other demonic entities in general. And by getting these people on these drugs and also promoting ritualism, what have you, a negative ritualism that lowers their vibration and makes them even more readily vulnerable to be taken up as a host. Eventually, what I call the interface takes over. So they don't have just an entity attachment with this particular individual. They have what Malachi Martin would call like a full possession. And whether the person is consciously aware or not, and many do, many of these adepts and many of these warlocks that are doing this negative stuff, they know full well that their familiars, and look at the root of that family, these reptilian familiars working through them, speak to them, teach them, show them how to open portals, so on and so forth. So you have this merging between the deep black aerospace, and if you study the origins of the aircraft industry, initially there was only 7 or 8 aircraft companies, and all of them, every single one of them, the seed money for those aircraft companies all came from the Rothschilds initially, and then the Rockefellers. So from the very beginning, the Rothschilds, that reptilian hybrid bloodline, had control of what later morphed into the aerospace corporations. And so you have this merger of the high tech with the hardcore black magic. And this is why they have given us their world. What was formerly a pristine world, abundance in nature and in life and what have you, they have changed that all around. And energetically, because it is a frequency war. It is a frequency war going on, and it's full spectrum dominance in every conceivable way. And what they're going to do now is they know that these cataclysms are coming, and they've already started the ball rolling on the depopulation and eugenics with the fluoride vaccines, GMO, so on and so forth. Wars, endless wars, and what they're doing also. There's another thing that we needed to point out is that there is a spiritual net that has been cast over this planet that compels souls to always come back. Now, I do believe that a lot of us have chosen to come here at this point in time and space to try to make a difference. And if one were to track their past lives, they would see that a lot of the lives that we've mapped out for ourselves going way back was basically to prepare us for this point in time and space. And here we are, right? I know a lot of quick turnarounds, as I call them, people that passed away either prior to, during, or shortly after World War II. And so what better way to prepare oneself for what's going on now than to have lived through World War II and all that implies. So I'm talking to all the spiritual warriors out there, Solaris, yourself, Ed, everyone else, that the hosting program, to get back to your original question, DNA manipulation is the fundamental building block of the reptilian overlordship. That's how they've managed to assert control over the surface. And then they've put a lot of their temples and megalithic sites over all these vortex areas, and then they keep imbuing all this negative energy into these places. So it's up to us individually and collectively to raise the vibe of this place. And we're doing that. We're doing that. The tide has turned. I really believe that. The tide has turned. A tipping point has already been reached because they can't stop all of these really spiritually oriented, metaphysically oriented people who've decided, whether they realize it or not, are consciously aware of it or not, to make a difference. There's a lot of people, I must say, who've decided to not only sit on the sidelines consciously, but they try to pull the rug out from those of us who are trying to make a difference. And they hurl all this new age la-di-da crap at us about being fear-based and fear-driven and why do you want to think about these things, right? Well, we have to think about these things because just sitting in a lotus position and hoping these things go away, it's not going to work. And I like to draw historical parallels, like when the Mongols were invading Europe, or the Huns, or whatever the case may be. Nobody said to one another, okay, well, let's not talk about the Mongols because that's fear-based, because you don't want to draw that negativity towards you, okay? Those are real issues that had to be addressed. And it's the same thing now. All this stuff is coming to a head. And if enough people really work on healing, reintegrating, especially the Mylabs out there, because if enough Mylabs reintegrate, be able to merge their altars to the point where they not only can retain that inner harmony, but on a conscious level access all these metaphysical abilities, the game is over, because there's nothing that'll stop us from throwing the yoke of the reptilian overlordship, kicking it to the curb, throwing it out of our lives. because what's going on is they're able to utilize and exploit these metaphysical capabilities in these Mylabs. Sometimes they put them in altered states of being, even, right? Not only just altered personalities. Now, a lot of these people, these Mylabs on a conscious level, they can manifest abilities, but sometimes not to the degree that the controllers can. So I think an objective for a lot of Mylabs is to really work on their abilities. But what's happening also, as you pointed out, Ed, is, and I think the previous caller might have mentioned this too, is when Mylabs try to enhance their metaphysical abilities, Greys, Reptilians, demons, and just all kinds of negative nasties intervene and destabilize them and prevent them from doing that. But the people that I know are quite stubborn, and as soon as they get their energy back, they're at it again. So it's all about just continually progressing forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question, Ed.
Yeah, you did. I was wanting to ask you another question. You were talking about the sexual thing, and what are your thoughts on? A lot of people nowadays are having sports sex, casual sex, or sex without love.
Oh, yes.
As selfishness, okay? Personal selfishness. And what do you think that does to a person that may be hosted upon and the other person involved that has no idea? Do you think that opens them to hosting too?
Big time. Let me just describe some of the things that people have told me that knew they were having entity attachment issues. That when they have intercourse with somebody, they sometimes step out of their normal waking consciousness, steps out of their own body and stands on the sidelines, if you will, and observes as their physical body just continues to have intercourse with the other person. And sometimes the intercourse starts to delve into very perverse sadomasochistic bondage and discipline type areas. And I'm not passing judgment on anyone who indulges in such things. I'm beyond this whole shame labeling kind of thing. I mean, but what happens also is when someone is being manipulated sexually and they've got issues with entity attachment, even partial entity attachment, these entities have a way of mimicking the thought patterns of the people they're manipulating, make them think that their thoughts are their own when at times they are not. So what these entities are into is anything of a sensate nature, not just intercourse, but like cross-dressing, bondage and discipline, anything of a sensate nature, role-playing, certain kinds of role-playing. And a lot of the times, like, for example, I'll give it to you from the other point of view, where a woman will be having intercourse with a guy who's a tweaker, a meth head, who's been taken up by one or more entities, because sometimes people are what I call a collective, as multiple entities take them up. And it's not just reptilians that take people up as hosts. Sometimes it's greys or sometimes it's mantis beings. It depends on what the preponderance of the other extra DNA is. But anyway, what some of these women describe is that when these hosted boyfriends of theirs start having intercourse with them, they begin to become aggressive. They begin to strangle the women. Their eyes literally start to glow, either yellow or red are two very common colors. And their face literally starts to change, shape shift. Sometimes their body starts to shape shift. So that happens too. So you see where I'm going with this, right? Because it's not just like a bodily fluid kind of thing. There's an energetic transfer. And if the person who's having intercourse with one of these hosted individuals, if that person in any or all areas, physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, is damaged, like there's holes in the auric field,
yes,
those entities will establish strongholds in people, and it may manifest as like nausea originally. Another way this happens also, if someone goes to a healer, but they're not really a healer, they're like like the healer is taken up as a host, and they start messing with someone's meridians and doing body work on them. Oh, that's a great way for someone to suddenly get an attached entity, and pretty soon dogs.
Yeah.
And listen, gentlemen, here I don't want to break it up for a second, but I just
sure.
Ed, I'm going to have to let you go. I'm going to Michael's
hey, great.
Great questions, Ed. Great questions.
Yeah,
Ed.
and I want to thank you for calling in, Ed. I really do.
Thank you
we're getting
both so
close to
much.
wrapping this up, and I want to make sure Michael gets his question.
I understand. Thank you.
You got a really switched on audience here. I'll tell you.
I'm telling you. Thank you so much, Ed.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. And Michael, are you there?
I don't know. Am I here?
Yes, you are. Yeah, he's there. Michael had a question for you.
Hey, James,
sure.
Are you still in San Diego?
I'm in the general area. I kind of come and go.
I was just wondering because I'm in San Diego.
Oh, okay.
And LA, but I was wondering if you were aware of that. I'm aware of as well of the MK Ultra facilities over at the Coronado Naval Base.
It wouldn't surprise me because of all the SEALs there, and some of them are definitely being mind controlled because, this whole genetic manipulation, it carries over into the armed forces. Some of those people are full-on hybrids of one sort or another, and they're genetically predisposed to not only being taken up as a host, but some of them have a psych profile of a full-on psychopath. So they're going to do big-time mind control on some of those people, not only SEALs, but whoever they can get a hold of in a local community.
They also do the dolphin weaponization.
Oh yeah, it's horrible. Yeah,
and
it's leave the animals alone.
The submarines and stuff. My uncle, who was in naval intelligence, had taken me there when I was a child. These are memories that came from hypnotic regression, and they had done tests on me. I think I failed, but they were just like eye coordination tests. Mental concentration tests and stuff like that.
Well, what they do is a lot of the Mylab experiences are in naval facilities. They're on naval vessels. They're in submarines. They're in what appear to be ocean passenger liners, but a lot of the people on board are military types. They will even have balls and social functions on these ocean liners, submarines, like I mentioned, and a lot of the Mylabs are trained in sub-ops, lock in, lock out. They're trained to operate in submersible vehicle because there are not only underground advanced civilizations, there are races that live beneath the ocean floor that that are down there, and the military, the Navy are aware of them. The Navy is fundamentally involved in this. Of all of them, I would say that the Navy has, by far, in general, the most technologically advanced, even on the surface level, but especially in a deep black, weird science stuff. The Navy has always been far in advance precisely because naval intelligence and the fact that of the two original branches, the Army and the Navy has always been the more technologically oriented. Indeed, naval intelligence was the first real foreign intelligence gathering intelligence agency in the U.S. The Army had what amounted to an intelligence organization in the American Civil War, but that was strictly domestic. It was naval intelligence that was getting all involved in technology and whatnot.
And James, I just want to, just before we're getting ready to wrap this up real quick, and I want to tell you this has been a fabulous evening. Really appreciate you being here tonight, and I definitely would want you back. Yeah. So hopefully I can get you back in here because there's so much to cover, and I feel like these 2 hours just went so quickly.
They do.
But do you have a website or any way to get a hold of you?
Yes, universalseduction.com.
Okay.
And I think it's /Bartley.
Okay.
But if someone goes into a search engine, James Bartley plus Universal Seduction, it'll take you right to that site.
Excellent.
So you'll be able to people will be able to find me there. And one quick thing, can I give a shout out?
Sure.
Really quick. I'll give a shout out to a dear friend of mine, Madison Star Moon. Some of you might have heard about her. She's a chemtrail activist, and she's done a tremendous amount of work in the chemtrail field, and she's been under a lot of harassment, not just from trolls and shills, but she's received death threats. They actually turned loose one of those reptilian hybrid psychopaths against her, and she's having to watch her six. So I just want to send out some encouragement to her and encourage people to go to Madison Star Moon's Facebook page and just wish her all the best and give her prayers of protection, because she's fighting for us. She's doing all our work in the chemtrail field, and nobody could do it better. So thank you for letting me have that little shout out.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. And I do want to thank everybody for calling in tonight, and all of you callers, you did fabulous. Everybody at Revolution Radio, listener, staff, chat room, everybody for tuning in tonight. And please join me next week when my special guest will be David Weatherly, and he will be discussing the mysterious black-eyed children phenomenon, which of course is across the globe. So I guess that ties in some weird way. But also stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dunker and Mecky coming up next. They always have an excellent show, and they'll take you into the night from down under. So anyways, we have a few more minutes left, but I'd like to get that out of the way. One more thing I just wanted to bring up, if I could, real quick.
Sure.
You mentioned something about not going with the military for Mylabs if something happens. Is that what I heard, correct?
Not the surface military.
Okay.
The surface military, the surface security forces, and whatever nation they happen to be from. Right?
Okay, so if they come to your door, do not go with them. Is that it? If you're a Mylab or...
Well, people in general.
I get that, but I'm just curious.
but but a Mylab, yeah, because put those survival skills to use. It's quite possible you will be given a heads up that things are pretty imminent, and for what it's worth, and I hope people don't misconstrue this. Because, like I pointed out, they're telling their Mylabs to training them to escape and evade and survive, not for altruistic purposes, right? Because these people are essentially slaves, and a lot of them are made to do things that they would never do in normal conscious awareness. But for what it's worth, you're better off if you can make it underground rather than be stuck on the surface, unless you can get to a really remote place on the surface where you have fresh water. And they're going to pull out all the stops. The drones are going to come out. They're going to have infrared, forward-looking infrared. They're going to have just all kinds of black ops scouring the countryside. That's going to happen. But it's better than being in the cities, when you're in the country. So, and a lot of people have already been pre-positioned. There's many Mylabs and abductees in general that they follow their spirit guides, the guidance they're getting, spiritual guidance, and even the Mylabs have encouraged, Mylab controllers have encouraged people to move to more remote countrified locations. So a lot of people are already kind of moved in place. So yes, when anything to do with the surface. And another thing before we go, there is something to the zombie meme. There really is something to that, because not only have Mylabs been taken to these underground facilities and seen mutated, in some cases two-headed or other types of like zombie mutants or just one-headed mutants, but also I do believe that there's a capability, I won't go into details, to kind of unleash a whole lot of these these types, right, if the desire is there, because the public has already been primed with all these zombie movies. So when you hear people talking about zombies, because many Mylabs describe being trained in futuristic scenarios and training scenarios where they're battling zombies and helping people escape the cities to get away from zombie-infested cities. So,
and we've got the music there, so that means we're ready to rock and roll out of here. And thank you, James.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot,
Michael,
Solaris,
for calling in. Everybody else, Ed, everyone else who called in tonight. You guys have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.